Welcome back to the Your Story, Our Fight podcast. We have a really great show today about advocacy and how that works in the lupus world. But before we get started, I want to thank our sponsor, GSK. This program is brought to you in part by GSK, and they have been incredibly supportive, not just of the podcast, but of the entire Your Story, Our Fight public service campaign. So thanks to them. And I want to introduce you to Peter Morley. Peter Morley is known also by his Twitter handle, More Than My SLE. He is a fierce advocate for lupus patients and really all pre-existing condition healthcare advocacy falls under his purview. So welcome to the show, Peter.
Thank you for having me, Adam. It's very, I'm very humbled to be here, so thank you.
Oh, well, we appreciate you joining us. I think what I find really interesting about advocacy is, you know, it starts out as such a giant mountain to climb. And, you know, I would imagine it's not really the first thing that comes to mind when you get a lupus diagnosis. Or if it does come to mind, it's got to be pretty overwhelming. So what was the first step? Well, and I should also say, when in your sort of diagnosis and treatment, did you decide, okay, this is the direction I want to go?
Well, it was definitely not the first step. I was diagnosed in 2013, so it's almost been 8 years to the date. The first step was really understanding what it was that I had, and you know, I came to lupus already with several pre-existing conditions. You know, as some people may know, that I was disabled from an accident, and then I subsequently was diagnosed with cancer. So it was very, I don't want to say you're never ready for a lupus diagnosis, but I think I was in a little more, I came to it in a different perspective, if you can even say that. I mean, you know, I wouldn't, you know, having, you know, already at that point when I was diagnosed, I had already had 4 spinal surgeries and, you know, a surgery to remove part of my kidney because I had kidney cancer. You know, it was
so lupus was really this sort of other, oh no, now I have to add this to my list, right?
Right. Like, what is this? Like, oh my God, this is just something else that I have to deal with now. And what a pain.
It's interesting. I had the opposite experience. I had thyroid cancer well after my lupus diagnosis. And, you know, fortunately it was a very curable and treatable cancer, but yeah, my cancer diagnosis felt very, not benign, but it felt very, okay, here's another mountain to climb. So I'd imagine, you know, yours is the reverse of that, but the lupus really is with you for a lot longer.
Yeah, you know, it is ironic because you know, I've had cancer twice myself, and I'm glad you were a survivor.
You too.
Thank you. The cancers that I had were both like aggressive cancers, and ironically, both times that I've had them, they were found incredibly early. So I was incredibly lucky because I wouldn't be sitting here speaking to you if my kidney cancer, for instance, wasn't found incidentally. It wouldn't have been treated until, you know, a later stage. So it's interesting how things work out in life. But with lupus, getting back to that, you know, I wanted to understand as much as I could because I had very little knowledge of it, including the fact that men get lupus. I know that they did. I was aware of that, but I didn't realize the ratio was what it is, or what we think it is. And that was mind blowing. the first thing I did was I wanted to speak to other people, other peers, and I was, I was fortunately put in touch with the support group, and met other people, and I met other men that had lupus.
It is
And
few and far between, and you really realize you're such a small niche of a small part of the population of lupus, and that can be tough, I think, on men. I think a lot of the men that I've spoken to with lupus have a hard time sort of figuring out how to adjust to being such a small percentage of the population.
I think the hardest part for me was that it was very hard to find information, and it still is, that relate specifically to men. I find things about women in pregnancy and other issues, but I've found it to be a very hard topic to talk about, that I can relate to, except for the symptoms, the fatigue, the brain fog, a lot of the general symptoms that a lot of us with lupus, because as you know, we're all different. We all experience it differently. Some of us have sister autoimmunes, such as Sjogren's, which I have. I have Raynaud's as well, and I know a lot of lupus patients have that, but a lot of them don't. And then there are different types of lupus, and as you my Twitter handle, I have SLE, so it's
So how did that go into this? Okay, I'm going to go and, make 30 some odd trips to Washington, D.C. and lobby Congress. Like, where did that evolve from?
Yeah, it was never, that's a good question. Well, one thing I learned being chronically ill, especially being chronically ill before lupus, was that healthcare was an essential key element, component. Having continuous healthcare, having doctors that that were that coordination of care was so crucial to my not even getting better. I was at a point in my life where I knew that it wasn't about getting better, it was about staying stable. And that to me, I don't want to get worse. I want to just I'm at a decent point in my life. I may progressively get worse from what I've learned about lupus, right. But I can also stay stable. So losing healthcare was something that it drove me to advocacy. It drove me to speak publicly about lupus. And, I thought I was just going to bring awareness to the fact that men have lupus, and it evolved into this. I didn't set out to go to DC 32 times. And, it would have been more if it wasn't for, coronavirus.
Pandemic, right.
Yeah, I mean, this pandemic, but it didn't stop me from continuing to advocate, and make videos with members of Congress. And, now I'm working with the administration, and I have to say, not to, be partisan, but the Trump administration did not want to do good things for healthcare. And it was a battle. And that was a battle I didn't want to get involved with, but I found myself needing to get involved with, not only for myself, but for other people in our lupus community and other communities that didn't have that coordination of care and didn't have.
I would suspect there was a lot of people that felt that call to action. I mean, it's more, I would say, like playing defense. I mean, just to protect the gains that had been made the hard-fought gains over the 8 years of the Obama administration. I think, and I think everybody had to take kind of a war footing. And, and I think you're right. I think it's really about trying to maintain some balance and some consistency, because to me, I see a lot of fear of loss of healthcare insurance leading to an extraordinary amount of stress. And that leads back to, really bad outcomes for lupus patients in particular.
No, absolutely. It's, I live in New York City. I traveled to DC, right? You said 32 times. That's 64 round trips. 64 one-way trips. Pardon me. See, I can blame everything on lupus fog. And I am dyslexic as well. So that is not
a lot of trips.
It's a lot of trips. Yes, it's a lot of trips. As our current president, it's Amtrak Joe. I'm Amtrak Peter.
Right.
So it's you think a lot on those trips, but you also those trips were extraordinarily challenging because I would take an early train, like a 3:30 in the morning train. I don't even know if it's existing during the pandemic. And I would schedule meetings all day, and I would come home, and then I would completely crash for 3 days to a week just to recover. My body was broken, but I say this a lot, but as you and everyone else out there who suffers from lupus and other chronic illnesses, I never knew if that was going to be the last trip that I was going to be able to advocate. So I always advocated like it was my last trip. So I would schedule as many meetings as possible, and I really challenged myself. Back-to-back meetings.
So let me ask you. I want to interject, because here's I think the very first thing that people will ask if they wanted to do something similar to you is, how do you get the meetings? I think that it's that one. I think, and we're going to talk a little later about some of the other accomplishments you've had, but to me, you've had over 500 meetings with senators and congressmen and their representatives. And I know just from the work Lupus LA has done in that department, it's really hard to get meetings with the right people. And that to me is sort of the, where'd you find, like, how does that work? How'd you start?
It's different for everyone. I would just, again, this wasn't my intention, but, I made one trip the day of my first trip, the day that what was called the skinny repeal, and that was a repeal to take away or undo the ACA, which would have happened. And I just walked in and out of offices. And I spoke to anybody that would listen. And you know what, honestly, not in a pandemic, but in a non-pandemic, you could actually go to DC, and hopefully things won't, change when things hopefully get back to normal, or whatever
the new normal
will be. But you can just walk into an office in Washington, and you can ask to speak to the person, and most of the times they're amenable to speaking with you, Democrat, Republican. I think in a blue Congress and a blue executive branch, I think that Republicans would be probably even more inclined to speak with you. But there's several different levels of people, and I would always speak to probably what they would consider the lowest level. Not that they don't do an equal
Right.
amount of work. But I would start there, and I'd cultivate the relationship, keep in contact with them after I left Washington. And it just started from there. It just I would ask them if they knew somebody in this office, or I would just, again, I'd go to
Basic
DC.
networking, good networking.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Just networking, and just, when I had the energy to do it, I would do it. And because it mattered to me, and it also mattered to the people that I reached out to on social media, and in my case, Twitter, and I would ask them for healthcare stories. And a lot of times people proactively sent stories to me, and again, very humbling, to tell me stories that are extraordinarily private about their healthcare challenges, and I would bring them to their members of Congress. And that's another way to advocate, and that's what I did. And then I just, I self-titled myself a patient advocate,
Yeah.
and I would go to Congress, and I wouldn't even be talking about myself. I'd be talking about somebody else's experiences, and asking them, what can I do to help? What can I do to help this person? And what can I do to help you speak with other members of Congress to make things better? So that's how I got started.
Excellent. All right, we're going to take a quick break. We're going to be right back after this message.
Lupus LA devotes a portion of its funds raised to support medical research in an effort to find the causes of and cure for lupus. Visit our website at lupusla.org.
Welcome back. We're talking to Peter Morley, who is a lupus advocate, patient advocate, not just lupus, beyond that, just a real, I think you're a messenger. I mean, that seems to be, because you've got so many people that are at home worrying about healthcare, worrying about their illness, that don't have the access that you've now created. And I think, from my sense, I mean, you've become a real messenger for lupus patients. And tell me, what are you most proud of in terms of your accomplishments in DC?
Oh boy. It's, there are so many there, it's just, I mean, well,
All right,
first
I
of
got a
all,
better question. Tell me a story where you can really see that something you did really made a difference in somebody's life. Because I think when people think about advocacy and going to Washington, the general consensus is they'll never listen to me. My voice doesn't matter. I'm just one person. So tell me, I think what our listeners and viewers will want to hear is, wow, this one guy did this and it changed this for even for that one person.
uh, it's, again, it's really, so hard to narrow down. I've spoken for so many, or I've had the honor of having so many people's voices be heard. But I would have to, first of all, I hope that my 8th grade civics teacher is proud of me, because it's like, these are things, we used to talk about, and I never in my life, envisioned doing what I'm doing, and I wouldn't have if I didn't, if the things, it's very, you know, tragically happened to me, but also, if I didn't, if they didn't happen, I wouldn't be doing the things that I'm doing. Uh, you know, I would say, testifying, having the honor to be asked to testify not only once but 3 times was an incredible honor, and it was also a way to I always try to look for an opportunity to talk about lupus and to raise awareness to it, naturally, not just to like jam it in there, especially when it's not
Right.
something that is, it just doesn't make sense to do it. But testifying for Congressman Elijah Cummings, was quite an honor, and to have him speak to me, there were several patients who have been helped by subsidies and healthcare, including myself, and there was a big panel, of patients, a large panel, and I was at the end, and I was kind of bummed. I was like all the way at the end. I was like, okay, I wasn't,
Right.
like, this was my second time I testified. I was like, but I realized that he had placed me there so he could look at me and speak to me during the testimony. And he said to me that he thanked me. He thanked all the patient advocates, but then he looked at me and he said, "Thank you for taking your pain, turning it into your passion to do your purpose." And I will never, I'm like tearing up because it was so powerful.
Especially coming from him.
Yeah, it was just,
Yeah.
he was, I've had the unbelievable pleasure to meet so many members, both sides of the aisle. But he was just such a, he was such a, I mean, it was just like I don't want to call him a god, but he was on another level. Just the way that he spoke, the way that he made you feel, it was really, it really changed my life in the very, very short time that I had the privilege to know him.
So, okay, you're going down to Washington. You're going to testify in Congress for Elijah Cummings. Lupus and stress don't mix.
Right.
I cannot imagine sort of the anxiety, just the changes that are going on in your head and your mind and your heart and your body and your, just how do you prepare for something like that? I mean, I do a lot of public speaking, and I think that would terrify me to testify in Congress. And I think a lot of lupus patients who are listening to us are going to say, wow, how do you get yourself into that position without, I don't know, passing out?
Well, I think a lot of the meetings that I had before I testified had prepared me for testifying, because, I had met with, Speaker Ryan's office and, several other offices that I found very what you just described. So I felt that it, and I don't want to diminish it. It's not a piece of cake. It's not something that's easy, but I also, I had made some friends through Twitter who had offered, that I gotten to know and trust. And I had the fortunate ability to have them be my caregivers for several of my trips. And, as somebody with lupus, I mean, it's so important. You do what you need to do to get through it, and to conserve my energy, I would use the wheelchair or whatever, because those halls of Congress are very long, and and to save your advocacy, your energy for that testimony. But when I was speaking, I felt like I was speaking for so many other voices. It wasn't me. I mean, I know you called me a messenger early, but I think I agree with that. But I also feel that I'm a conduit, because there are people that their voices just come through me. I know that specific testimony. I also spoke for a woman that I know. Her name is Natalie Weaver, who she has advocated for medically fragile children, and she had a daughter who at that time had recently passed, and that was a very emotional testimony. And it was very important for me to make sure that her voice was heard. So allowing me to focus on other things took that anxiety, the energy. And again, I know when I go back home after this trip, I know that I can completely pass out. And I know, I don't schedule anything around these trips. I know that I can completely just, rest and do whatever I need to do. If I need to do a steroid taper to help myself, then I'll do it.
Right.
Look, it's not something that I would recommend people to do, because, and I may even have said this during that testimony, having lupus, and you probably relate to this since you've pushed your body many times, you are putting your health at risk. But, you have to weigh putting your health at risk versus advocating. And, like when we take new medications, we weigh the risk benefits of them. So the benefits of advocating are here, and the risks of not advocating are here. So of course I'm gonna push myself, because I may not be able to change the things that need to be changed in Congress or in Washington, D.C., but maybe I can push the needle just even a tiny bit. And, that's my contribution.
Lupus LA offers virtual support groups on a weekly basis and a bilingual and family support groups once every month. Visit our website at lupusla.org.
Do you think that the work you're doing and the focus you've had to put on that work has been, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but in general, a positive in your overall battle with lupus?
Yes. It's definitely allowed me to take my mind off of my daily, battles, because every day, as you probably know, is different. And it definitely is, but at the same time, it's been extraordinarily challenging at times. And God knows, I've traveled with a flare on multiple occasions, and God knows that I've come back with a flare, from the stress. So again, that's not positive, but I would still do it all again.
Yeah. So, okay, what's going to happen now that we have, at least for 2 years, the right combination, I would say, or a more healthcare friendly group of people, because I don't want to get political either, although it's hard for me not to, but what do you think we can look forward to in these next 2 years from this administration, from a healthcare perspective? Just sum up, if you were, what's coming up? Obviously, we have the pandemic first and foremost. But beyond that, what do you see?
Well, I mean, good things have already started happening. I think, I don't even know. I don't even understand to what extent the Trump administration had undone the ACA, had undone Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, disability. I know some things have already been undone. I think that's probably the first step. Some of them can't be done, very quickly, and it will take a while. So advocacy is, I think the most important thing to remember, talking to anyone out there, I think what we've learned from the last 4 years is complacency is never something that we should ever do. That we shouldn't just think that because we have a blue Congress and we have somebody in the White House that believes in healthcare, that things are going to get done. So I think it's up to us to keep advocating. And even more importantly, I'll give everybody a challenge out there because I'm giving myself a challenge. What I plan to do in the 117th Congress is to continue advocating the way that I have, continuing bringing the stories of people's healthcare challenges, but also trying to get Republicans on board because, like you said, in 2 years, things can change because, elections, of the House and some in the Senate, things can flip very quickly from a blue to a red, House or Senate or both. So it's really important and crucial to continue advocating in not only the Republican side, but the Democratic side to try to bring, bring both sides of the aisle together. There has to be bipartisan support on a lot of these healthcare issues, because if not, in 2 years from now, we can just revert to either things not getting done or we can revert to things getting undone. So if we're ever going to get to a place of universal coverage, whatever that might be, that we're gonna need to continue to advocate.
Great. I mean, I think that's a terrific message. We can find Peter Morley on More Than My SLE on Twitter. And I encourage everybody to support you, to listen to you, and especially for lupus patients, let you be their messenger, because I think it's really important. The work you've done is super impressive. Thank you for joining the Your Story, Our Fight podcast. And we wish you really continued success, and Lupus LA will be there right behind you anytime you need us.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And thank you for all the work that you do. And I will be here to support you as well.
On behalf of the entire team at Lupus LA, we thank you for joining the Your Story, Our Fight podcast. Please tune in, spread the word, and come back for more inspiring lupus stories. I'm your host, Adam Selkowitz, wishing you good health, and to always remember, your story is our fight.